News coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-ho, and it's good to have you with us. The US Treasury Department has added 3 more North Korean officials to their sanctions list, including one of Kim Jong-un's closest aides. This comes amid stalled negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington on the regime's denuclearization. And so the question becomes, how will this announcement affect those talks? We'll try to answer that later in our show. But first, we get the latest headlines with Devin Whiting from our news center. Devin?
Hi, Jung-ho. We'll start with the domestic news. President Moon Jae-in was briefed today by the education minister on policy plans for the coming year. In the administrative city of Sejong, Minister Yoon-hae gave him the latest on the education front, and in particular, the recent disclosure of widespread corruption at private kindergartens. There was then a discussion between the president, education officials, and others about how to overhaul the education ministry, how to solve the corruption problem, and how to make a level playing field in terms of building an inclusive nation. Later in the afternoon, the president will be briefed by the Minister of Labor, Lee Jae-kap, and in that meeting, a likely major topic is expected to be the changes in people's lives under the new 52-hour work week. While in Sejong City, President Moon held his weekly cabinet meeting there for the first time. In it, he admitted that while South Korea's economy has solid indicators at the macro level, those related to people's livelihoods are still underperforming. Here's the president.
양극화와 소상공인 자영업의 어려움도 해결되지 않았습니다. 조선, 자동차, 철강 등 전통적인 산업이 위기를 맞은 지역은 더더욱 어려움을 호소하고 있습니다. 다 함께 잘 사는 포용적 성장은 이런 문제들을 해결하지 않고는 불가능합니다.
In order for South Koreans to feel the economic accomplishments of this administration, President Moon said it's necessary to revitalize the local economy and in a speedy manner. He called on his cabinet to actively support local governments, especially in terms of upgrading infrastructure, in manufacturing, as well as through deregulation. South Korea collected more tax revenue in the first 10 months of this year compared to last year. Through October, in fact, the total was more than 98% of this year's target. The Ministry of Economy and Finance said Tuesday that the government had collected around $233.4 billion, an increase of $23.5 billion. In October alone, it brought in $26.3 billion. Revenue from corporate taxes increased due to rising profits, and income tax revenue also rose due to higher wages. South Korea and the U.S. are trying to finalize a deal on sharing the costs of stationing American troops on the Korean peninsula. The existing 5-year deal expires just a few weeks from now, and President Trump wants Seoul to pay a lot more, and for new kinds of expenses, too. Kan Hyung-woo has this report.
South Korea and the United States are holding their 10th round of negotiations of the year over the Special Measures Agreement that is sharing defense costs for the stationing of some 28,500 American troops on the Korean peninsula. From Tuesday to Thursday, the allies will try to reach a deal which should take effect starting next year. The current 5-year deal signed in early 2014 will expire at the end of December. One of the biggest bones of contention is how much each side will have to pay. Under the existing deal, Seoul contributed around $850 million in 2018 alone to have U.S. Forces Korea on its soil. But last week, the Wall Street Journal reported that President Trump wants Seoul to pay as much as double the current amount. After the 9th round of talks last month, Seoul's foreign ministry said the two sides made some progress in finalizing a deal, but they're still in the process of narrowing their differences in certain areas. Another issue is Washington's demand that Seoul pay for a new category of expenses called operational support, which is for American troops outside the peninsula. This operational support includes the deployment of aircraft carriers, long-range bombers, and nuclear submarines. But South Korea is standing firm that it will only contribute money to 3 areas, which are payroll, construction, and logistics, as it has in the past. Led by Ambassador Chang Won-sam, the South Korean delegation will seek to strike a deal with the U.S. negotiation team led by Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary Timothy Betts. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
As of October, Russia and China have reportedly sent refined petroleum products to North Korea equivalent to about half of the limit set for the year by the UN Security Council. But experts say with the many illegal ship-to-ship transfers, it's probably a lot more. According to the Security Council Sanctions Committee, Beijing has reported shipments to the north as of October of 14,760 tons of petroleum products. Adding that to the shipments reported by Russia as of September, and it's almost 30,000 tons. Experts say that's equivalent to about 250,000 barrels compared to the cap of 500,000. Russia is late, though, reporting shipments for October, which will raise the figure. A bipartisan group set up by the U.S. Congress says North Korea's approach toward religion is among the most repressive in the world. In a recent report, the Commission on International Religious Freedom said, in fact, that there is no freedom of religion in the North. Although North Korea's constitution does, in principle, guarantee freedom of religion, the regime has absolute control over houses of worship. Independent believers can face arrest, torture, and even execution. The Commission recommends that the U.S. government use dialogue to push North Korea to improve religious freedom and human rights. The short list of candidates for Time magazine's 2018 Person of the Year is out, and President Moon Jae-in is on it. Since 1927, the U.S. magazine has identified the person or groups of people who it thinks, for better or worse, most influenced the world during the year. Choi Si-young has this story.
Unveiled on NBC's Today Show on Monday, Time magazine's shortlist has 10 candidates in the running, including South Korea's leader Moon Jae-in. The magazine cited President Moon's role in hosting the North Korean leader's sister at the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and the 3 historic inter-Korean summits held in 2018. It added President Moon was the key player that helped set up the landmark meeting in Singapore between Kim Jong-un and President Trump back in June. For 3 consecutive years since 2016, President Trump made Time's list. The magazine said President Trump enacted controversial policies from separations at the border to a trade war with China and navigated crises involving both himself and his staff, one of which is the probe into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Robert Mueller, the man heading the special counsel investigating Russia's influence, is also on the short list. Time magazine notes how the probe led by the former FBI director has already resulted in more than 191 criminal charges against 32 people and 3 companies. One of the international candidates is Saudi journalist and dissident Jamal Khashoggi. A vocal critic of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the journalist is believed to have been murdered on orders from the prince. His death at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul prompted international outcry and criticism toward the Saudi regime. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
The U.S. government has slammed more North Korean officials with sanctions. Coinciding with International Human Rights Day on Monday, the Treasury Department said the measures are in response to the officials' alleged human rights abuses and censorship efforts. Lee Seung-jae has further details.
The U.S. Treasury Department has sanctioned 3 North Korean officials, including a top aide to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, citing ongoing and serious human rights abuses and censorship. The U.S. Treasury identified him as Choi Ryong-hae, an aide long regarded as a right-hand man to Kim Jong-un, who also heads the Workers' Party of Korean Organization and Guidance Department. State Security Minister Chung Kyung-taek and the Director of North Korea's Propaganda and Agitation Department, Park Kwang-ho. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the North Korean officials direct departments that perpetrate the regime's brutal state-sponsored censorship activities, human rights violations, and abuses to suppress and control the population. Mnuchin added the latest sanctions demonstrate the United States' ongoing support for freedom of expression and opposition to endemic censorship and human rights abuses. Observers say while it's still unclear, the decision to sanction the officials may be related to the recent stall in the Pyongyang-Washington nuclear talks, which have made little progress since Kim Jong-un and President Trump met in Singapore in June. The Treasury Department said these sanctions shine a spotlight on the North's treatment of people inside the regime, as it will serve as a reminder of North Korea's brutal treatment of U.S. citizen Otto Warmbier. The American student died in mid-2017 after 17 months of detention in North Korea. These sanctions freeze any assets the officials may have under U.S. jurisdiction and generally prohibits them from engaging in any transactions with anyone in the United States. It now begs the question, how will these sanctions impact the nuclear diplomacy between the two sides? Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
For more, we have with us Dr. Woo Jung-yup, a research fellow from the Sejong Institute in Seoul. It's good to have you back on the show.
My pleasure.
So, 3 North Korean officials have been named in a new list of sanctions by the US Treasury Department. Can you tell us a little bit more about who they are and why they've been targeted?
So this time, the sanctions are targeting 3 individuals and 3 groups within North Korea. First, it's Mr. Choi Yong-hae, who is known as a right-hand man of the Kim Jong-un, and he's also the director of Workers' Party organization and the guidance department, and which are notorious for the censorship within North Korea. And also Jung Kyung-taek, who is the head of the state security, which are dealing with the notorious prison camp in North Korea, and Park Kwang-ho, who is the head of propaganda department in the Workers' Party, and they are kind of known as for the brainwashing North Korean people. So it's not only the prison camp and the human rights, but also this time the state censorship is very much criticized by the U.S. government. So since Kim Yo-jong, sister of Kim Jong-un, has been already sanctioned by the same human rights issues, and Kim Young-chul is already sanctioned, that this time United government add more people on the list of the sanctioned because of the human rights issues. But this is not going, I don't think that this is going to affect much heavily on the current status of North Korea-US relations.
Right, but Washington must have known who these people were before the sanction list was announced. I mean, these figures aren't secret. They've been known for a while. So why now? Why have the US decided to slap these sanctions right now when there are these delicate situations between North Korea and the US with these talks?
So for the United States, because of the current relations between North Korea and China and Russia and even in the South Korea, that there are a possibility that the maintaining sanction is going to be very difficult. So to maintain the level of sanctions, the U.S. government believes that they have to update sanctions anytime that they have chances. So as you just mentioned, that these people are already known as a part of the leader group in the North Korea, and they are believed to have committed all kinds of human rights crimes and the censorship of the media in North Korea. So it's not new, but as you just mentioned, that it can be a message to North Korea that the United States can always bring up these human rights issues against North Korea, even though United States has never brought up this issue since June this year. So I think that with the stalled progress between North Korea and the United States with regard to the North Korea's nuclear weapons, United States might be able to use this kind of these human rights issues as a leverage to North Korea, or it can be just bureaucratic issues that U.S. departments, they have their own priorities in each department. So that is why they just brought up these issues separate from the current negotiation with North Korea.
You earlier said that you don't actually believe, though, that this new announcement will affect this negotiation between Pyongyang and Washington that much. Why do you believe that way?
Because on the same issues, that North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, is always been on the list for the sanctions, and Kim Young-chul is already on the list. So now we have these 3 people, even though they are the part of the leaders group in North Korea, but they are below than those Kim Yo-jong and Kim Young-chul. So it's still a negative, it still has a negative effect onto the negotiation between U.S. and North North Korea, but it does not give enough reason for North Korea to break from the negotiation with the United States. That is why I believe that it has still a negative effect, but it's not as big as North Korea to break off from the current dialogue with the United States.
So you just think it's a small tool just to perhaps put a little bit of pressure in this situation, but you don't think it's as perhaps a calculated a gamble to try and make something happen?
So the content of this sanction is maybe a travel ban of these individuals and the freezing of their assets in overseas. So it does not really big for individuals who doesn't have foreign assets or who does not intend to travel foreign countries. So the real impact of sanction itself is not as harsh as it looks like. However, the symbolic meaning of the sanctions onto these people are more meaningful than its content. So that is why I think that the real impact of sanction is minimal, but it can be work as a symbolic message to North Korea.
So, and it's not all negative at the moment. You talk about a symbolic message. So what's a new development that's also come out is that there are reports that are saying that South Korea and the US are thinking of renaming their joint exercises for next year. Now, they're known as, there's a few known, including Key Resolve and Ulchi Guardian Freedom and Foal Eagle, but they're saying that they want to maybe change these names, perhaps to try and give a symbolic gesture to North Korea that they're changing their tactics about how they do these drills. I mean, what do we know about these reports, and would it really make much of a difference?
So for years that Korea and the United States have maintained these joint military drills mainly for two purposes. First one is to maintain the readiness and because like two countries wanted to make their militaries ready for any fight at any times. And second one is the messaging to North Korea. So all the military drills are not intended to make public. However, whenever we had these big size joint military drills between US and South Korea, that we always try to convey a message to North Korea in the region that South Korea and the United States are ready to fight anytime with all those like strategic assets deployed. So now with a comprehensive military agreement and with this atmosphere of having dialogue with North Korea, maybe the messaging part should be diminished because of the diplomatic consideration. So that is why we are trying to decrease the level of messaging part of the joint military exercise. And as we are suspending a series of joint military exercises right now, that I think it might send a symbolic message to North Korea that we don't want to agitate North Korea with the name of these military drills, but we still want to keep low profile of these military drills as far as we can.
On one hand, South Korea and the US are perhaps negotiating about these renaming of these drills. But on the other hand, South Korea and the US are also at loggerheads at the moment because they're continuing this renegotiation of the cost-sharing burden of hosting US forces in Korea. Now, the next round of negotiations is taking place in Seoul from Tuesday. And interestingly, though, in the lead up to this, a report was released by the Wall Street Journal, which revealed that US President Donald Trump wanted to double the current cost that South Korea is paying to host these US forces, from $830 million to $1.6 billion. I mean, what do we know about the negotiations so far, and how likely do you think it is that Trump will get what he wants?
So the President Trump has always maintained his position on these cost-sharing issues between Korea and the United States. So when even he visited South Korea, and even after he visited the Pyeongtaek base, the Camp Humphrey, that he still argued that the South Korea needs to pay more. So I think that it is reported from the Wall Street Journal that United States won at least 1.5 or twice as much that South Korea is now contributing to the cost sharing. But current system of current sharing limit how much South Korea actually can pay. So the United States want to add more items on the current system of current cost sharing. But now with suspended military drills, it's difficult for two countries to agree on what items can be added to the current system of cost sharing. And also the total amount of contribution should be made by South Korea should not be exceeding the public acceptance level. So now the report says that United States won something around 1.5 or twice the range. However, South Korean government is trying to minimize the increase of the amount. So we have to see whether two countries can reach a point that they can all satisfy each party.
I mean, what's the worst case scenario here? I mean, do these negotiations go on for a long time? And what message does this send to North Korea, especially when South Korea and the US are meant to be working together on this?
So the current schedule will end at the end of December this year. So if there has been cases in the past that two countries could not reach an agreement by the deadline. So there's a case that we had similar cases in the past. However, if we don't come to an agreement, then we are going to be late in paying the salaries to the Korean workers in the U.S. base here, and also there are some delays in the payment of the construction and the maintenance cost, and also South Korea's assistance in the operation. So I think that with all these minor things, it can be manageable if we can come to an agreement January or February next year. However, the bigger issue is that now South Korean government and South Korean public can have some negative sentiment toward the U.S. government that why do Koreans need to pay more now? Because we have certain kind of rules of increasing the contribution to the cost sharing so far, and then all of a sudden that we have to pay double the price for the USFK, then what's the purpose of the USFK? That kind of negative sentiment can be grown within the Korean public. At the same time that US government probably think that this kind of negotiation would hurt the maintaining the US-ROK alliance in the future. And it can send a negative message to the NATO and the allies in the other regions. And for North Korea, this kind of issues can be viewed as a cleavage among the strong allies between US and South Korea. So it can be shown as a negative signal to the allies overseas and also to the North Korea.
Oh, just before we go, one last topic I'd like to get your thoughts on as well. So there's a lot of inter-Korean exchanges and cooperation projects going on right now. For example, there's a forestry talks that are happening in Pyongyang between officials and experts over there. There's also going to be a round of healthcare talks this week and sports talks. I mean, what do you think about all these talks that are happening right now between the two Koreas, and how significant are they really?
So for the forestry talks, forestry issues are considered as humanitarian issues. So there are a lot of exemptions can be made for those kind of issues. So unlike railroad reconstruction issues, that there are these areas can proceed without much blocking from the U.S. government and the UN sanctions. So I think that we still need a lot of consultation with the U.S. government, but these areas are where we can proceed without concerning too much on the U.S. oppositions.
We'll have to keep seeing how those results of those talks come out, and hopefully we'll get your thoughts on them before the end of the year as well. That's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in today, as usual, and sharing us your insights.
Thank you very much.
So I'll be back with another guest tomorrow for further analysis of the day's top stories. In the meantime, stay tuned to Arirang for our later newscasts for the updates from Korea and around the world. Thank you for watching and goodbye for now.